Right, hello, everybody. It's our first night of it's our MCU Mondays, MCU Lovin', which makes sense when you read it out loud. It's like McLovin with a U in the middle. We're rewatching all the MCU movies and re-ranking them. And yeah, it's our first one. We're doing Iron Man from 2008 with Chad
Yeah,
and
so
Rory.
for my re-ranking list, it's now number one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
spoiler. I think that's going to be unanimous.
yeah.
Um,
So, do you guys remember whereabouts it was on your original rankings? If you have an idea of what those were.
um, I don't remember how many MCU movies there are at any given time.
Hmm.
Um,
I want to say
but
there's like 25
Yeah, I think
now.
yeah,
27 now. I looked it up.
like without a pen and
Yeah.
paper, I'm not going to
Right.
be able to like link them in order. But I do remember that I had it ranked pretty high for not just nostalgia and starting it out, but also just being a decent movie all the way around.
Right.
Um, but I haven't. I would say that I ranked it in the good category. That was
Right.
good no matter what. Um,
This was my number two on
Oh,
my
okay.
old list.
okay.
It does get extra points for starting everything out, but every time I would watch this movie when it was on like TNT or TBS or USA or whatever, one of those movies where it's just like, well, yeah, just throw this thing on. It's always good to watch, no matter how many times I've seen it. Like that's one of the big things about it. Like I just felt like it's a excellently paced movie.
Yeah.
It is a well-paced movie. One thing that I noticed more rewatching it this time um, was I felt like other than like Batman Begins, I can't think of another superhero movie that spent that amount of time on the not being a superhero, but
Right.
getting up to being a superhero part, which is cool. I'm not saying that that should be done more often because it's kind of a singular event, but
Yeah.
I thought they did a really good job of it. What was your previous number one, Chad?
Winter Soldier.
Oh, we have to go back and that like in the middle somewhere.
Nah, I think that
But I
one we're
only
gonna
saw it
get to in
once.
probably about maybe 2 months.
Yeah. So when we get to it, I'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see how I feel about that one. There's like got a lot of stuff with me from that one. But yeah, I had Iron Man as number 4 on my list originally, but like I just redid my list like this last week, and it was mostly just like which ones do I remember the most, and like those are the highest ranking ones, and like the ones I haven't seen are at the bottom.
Hmm.
Everything's kind of in that
Okay.
order, just how much I remember them.
That makes sense because I
Yeah,
mean, if it's real good, you're gonna remember it.
right. Yeah, it's got to be good if I remembered it. But I think most of them I've only seen once, and a handful of the new ones I haven't seen yet at all.
I think this will be my second rewatch of all of them up
Cool.
until either Captain Marvel or Far From Home.
Right.
Um, so mine's a little bit more recent, I guess. Um, I think prior to Spider-Man Homecoming, Winter Soldier was my number one, and
Hmm.
then Spider-Man Homecoming beat that out. But then again, I am heavily biased towards Spider-Man.
Yeah, I was gonna say
So
you're a big Spider-Man guy. He's probably your number one,
yeah,
I think,
Hmm.
right? So
I
And
was
he did the
big into
important thing in the
Spider-Man.
movie.
But I'm sorry.
He did the thing. He
Yeah,
lifted the heavy thing.
yeah,
ah,
It's it's like the most Spider-Man thing that Spider-Man can do.
yeah,
yeah. When I think for me that movie more than any others nailed Peter Parker right,
Hmm.
and that's what actually made me like the movie more is
mm,
that they really got the Peter Parker aspect because I feel like any superhero movie you need the alter ego and the superhero both at the same time, and most movies get one right and not the other, and that's
yeah,
kind of what makes the MCU unique is the fact that they've really done a good job of nailing it.
yeah.
Um, but
Yeah.
Also, most of those characters don't have an alter ego, which makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, like there's not a lot of secret identities going on. But I remember when this came out, like everyone was, all my friends were like, "Oh man, Robert Downey Jr. That's like totally who Tony Stark is supposed to be, basically."
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
kind of an asshole, rich guy, but like cool.
Yeah,
What
it was
do
one
you
of
guys
those
remember
perfect
about that? Yeah.
casting moments.
I mean, you asking what I remembered before I watched it,
Right.
or
Well, what it was like, in 2008. Remember what it was like to be
yeah,
14
like
years ago.
when they were casting Robert Downey Jr., I thought that was a good call. Just because, I mean, I cannot think of anybody that is better as Tony Stark than Robert Downey Jr.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to imagine
Also,
anyone else doing that.
I don't feel like this is exactly a great example of his acting ability, because he does have acting chops, but he's just basically playing himself, or ever since this, Robert Downey Jr. has just been playing Tony Stark in
Right.
real life.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
He found that this role is a
the-
pretty cool persona to have, so I think he's kind of like made that his vibe all the time.
yeah. And I thought, I think the one that got me was Obadiah Stane, because I could not imagine the dude being the
Right.
corporate dude.
Yeah. And like big and intimidating too. Like,
Yeah.
you don't usually think of Jeff Bridges as that way, but yeah, he's a big guy. And with the bald
Mhm.
head and the beard, he's like, oh yeah, he could choke me out.
So
That's what I always think about with big intimidating guys. Like, can this guy choke me out? I think Jeff Bridges can do it.
It wasn't just the casting too at the time. Like I remember when they announced that Jon Favreau was going to be directing, and I was like, "Oh, the guy from Swingers, the sad one."
yeah,
Yeah.
like I will admit, before the MCU, I was not like following him. But like when The Mandalorian was coming out, I was like, I'm not sure this is a good idea, Star Wars. You've already screwed up a couple of things. I don't
Yeah.
see how setting up a precursor with Boba Fett is a good idea. Oh, it's not Boba Fett, it's some other guy. Well, why do I care? And then they're like,
Right.
Jon Favreau, and I was like, that guy doesn't fuck up. I'm in.
Mhm.
So I was not prepared for
Yeah.
how he was going to actually not screw up my childhood.
Yeah. Did you guys ever watch any of his show that he had on? I think it was IFC or A&E or something, like Dinner for Five, where he would just get him and 5 or 4 other like filmmakers or celebrities and stuff, and they would just have dinner and talk about making movies and things. So I've
No.
seen some of that back when it was on, like in the late '90s, and like I always thought of him as a guy who really knew and loved the movies. So I felt like he would be a good director to take on something like this.
I've heard good things about it, but I could never afford those channels until
Right.
like maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah,
I just
they're
didn't
on
know it
YouTube
existed.
or something. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna check that out on YouTube, because
Yeah.
he, like it's like him and the other guy,
Right.
Feige.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like those guys have blown me away with just. I think they're like the first duo of the Hollywood types that were like, what if we just made superhero movies like the comics and didn't try to really reinvent them?
Right.
And that's why
100%.
the MCU has been successful.
Yeah.
So.
So like it was comic book people making movies about the comic books, as opposed to like movie people trying to force the comic book stuff into the regular
Yeah.
Hollywood movie molds.
And I think that's why like every change that they've made to like stuff that's canon is stuff that most comic book fans are like, no, you got to change that because it didn't make any sense since
Right, yeah.
1960 something when they first came up with it. Like Thanos, his original backstory is just dumb.
Right.
Like,
There's a lot of guys where it's like they jettisoned about 80% of their origin, and they're like, here's something that makes sense.
Yeah. That's good.
Um,
Yes,
'Cause, like-
outside.
go ahead.
I was thinking about the dinner for five thing. There's a special they did on Disney Plus about like the making of the Mandalorian. I forgot what it was called, but like it was for the first season. They had like a different episode for each episode or whatever. I think, but that was the format of it was very much like Dinner for Five. It was a round table discussion thing. I forgot what it was called. But anyways, go on. What we were talking about now.
Oh, I was gonna say, I feel like
Yeah.
these movies came out about midway through the Ultimate Universe of Marvel's run. And I know that like when I was watching it the first time, I was like picking and choosing, like, well, this is from the Ultimate Universe, this is from the 616, this is Ultimate, this is 61, and I felt like it was a really good blend when I was watching it that first time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say that one. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say you guys are big comic book guys. Like I didn't read a lot of comics. I just kind of absorb things, just sort of that cultural osmosis thing. So I knew who Iron Man was and like his whole thing about being an alcoholic and stuff. But I never read any of his stuff. So
yeah,
I didn't get a lot of the Easter eggs and things. So I was gonna ask you guys about that. If anything stuck out to you that way, because I feel like this is probably the one with the least amount of Easter eggs out of all the MCU movies.
I mean, I don't know if I would say Easter eggs. I know there's a lot of things that have been like, they're like callbacks or like shout outs to things from the comic books, like frames and whatnot.
Right.
But yeah, this one I don't know if I'm a big enough movie nerd to catch Easter eggs in it.
Okay.
Usually, like when I'm watching movies, I'm really bad at Easter egg finding, just in general. And also, there's a lot of stuff that when they reference it in the MCU movies, just because I read so many comic books, I'm like, oh yeah, they're referencing this, and I don't even track that. Not everybody else just knows.
Right.
So
yeah, it's not a reference. It's just like a plot point or something, or just part of the universe, so it doesn't stick out as a reference or an Easter egg or something. Yeah.
Yeah, like when they referenced the 10 rings in this one, I was like the first time I watched it, I was like, oh yeah, those terrorists, and I realized that not everybody else realized that. Was.
I did. It never stuck me at all until this last rewatch. I'm like, oh, that's a thing. I guess from the Shang-Chi movie. Like I just thought, oh, that's just the name of the terrorist organization that these guys are, and never thought about it again. I guess it's related to the new movie.
That kind of stuff where they make sort of the plot points and the whole interconnected universe, like those are the ones where it's like it's hard when you're like a certain level of nerd to be like, is this an Easter egg or is this just part of the movie?
Right.
Whereas something like during the fight between Iron Man and Ironmonger on the freeway, in the background they have a skyscraper that says Roxanne Industries in the background. That kind of stuff is like, okay, that one definitely an Easter egg,
right?
Because we're probably never going to see Roxanne, but you never know what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And like I don't know how much of that is just like because when I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, Roxanne, because that's gonna come up, like, but it doesn't even track to me that that's something that you wouldn't just see in the background. Like I've seen so many superhero fights take place at Roxanne that,
yeah, and just for our viewers that don't know, I mean, I know what Roxanne is. Would you guys explain what that is for?
Roxanne is like a tech company, kind of like Stark International, where but they're a lot less good, for lack of a better word. They're unethical, and a lot of like the Scorpion out of SpiderMan, I want to say.
Okay.
A lot of the scientists that created him were like working through Roxanne, and J. Jonah Jameson. But
they're basically standard issue corporation, but evil.
Yeah. Most corporations aren't that far away from being evil.
But these guys are like good at it.
Mhm.
So like they're creating like giant robots and death machines, not
Yeah.
just screwing with people's pensions and destroying Middle America.
Right.
Which, like, I'm just gonna say, like, corporations, if you're watching, like, if you were to do your evil in a more grandiose way, at least it would be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More giant robots, less devaluing of property and stuff.
Yeah. Like, if you were out there just like killing the middle class, I'd be okay with it.
Right.
Just going out there and letting the middle class die, that's lame.
Yeah. I mean, just stomping on their houses with sentinels or something, that would be.
Yeah.
At least it would be fun to watch.
Exactly.
Yeah. We don't want to bring the X-Men stuff into this. We're not allowed to do that yet, legally, right?
Not yet. Not yet.
One day. One day soon.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to that myself, but
No.
also I'd really like it if they could make a good Fantastic Four.
Yeah, that's crazy that they can't. They've never done anything with that was worth anything.
Like,
I think that's one of those where like the tone of the comics and the tone of what studios think we want are so dramatically different that they're always going to come out kind of wonky.
Yeah.
I can see that. When I think too, like the Fantastic Four, like you would need to treat the Fantastic Four like an Avengers movie where there's 4 main characters that each have their own franchise. Because trying to like just sell them only as a team really sells them short. As a team, they're better as a background team than a main stand-in, I think.
Yeah, someone that, like, you have to go. Our heroes have to go talk to Reed Richards about something as opposed to just following his story. Yeah.
The other big problem with making a good Fantastic Four movie is the sort of platonic ideal of what a good Fantastic Four movie was already made with The Incredibles.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. Like it'd be hard to top that as far as just a good. But also that they did treat that like each of them had their own story, which is something that no Fantastic Four movies ever done.
Right.
So,
I hate to say it, but I think it might work better as like a series where you can kind of get more into the characters and stuff.
I agree.
Against series and more for movies. But I think
Yeah,
it works more for
I would love
team.
in our long series that they do where it's just sci-fi and family drama.
I would be down for that, like a Star Trek meets Lost in Space feel.
Right.
And I'm actually really digging on the series so far that I've seen of the MCU. Like I might be in the minority there, but I really like them.
I still haven't watched any. Chad, you're probably all caught up.
Yeah, I've watched all of them. I like all of them.
I haven't
There's
watched
none of them
Hawkeye
where I'm like,
yet.
Hawkeye is it aims lower than all of the other previous series, but that also means that it's much easier to stick the landing.
I mean, I feel like the fun part about the series is that they don't have to do like a story that's digestible in only an hour and a half. Like they can, which feels more like a comic book. Like they can have this is the little bad, but there's an overarching bad that we're still dealing with.
Right.
Yeah, one of my favorite things that they did with the Marvel series that's been on Disney Plus recently was What If, which was the one that I was the most excited about when they announced it, because I loved that comic growing up.
Right.
But the fact that it's just like, here's like here's a bunch of episodes where it's all just like, here's a story, here's another story, here's another story, here's another story. Like, we're getting issues of a comic book.
Right.
Mhm.
And then at the end, they're just like, oh, yeah, this is how everything ties together.
Nice.
I guess we should probably talk about Iron Man.
Yeah, I guess Iron Man specifically. This one.
Well,
Yeah.
one thing that you guys had mentioned was, wrapping up the story in an hour and a half. And like I had said at the top of the show that this is one of the most excellently paced movies, in my opinion. It feels like this thing's running at like about an hour and a half, but this is just over 2 hours long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah, which puts it kind of in the middle for length of Marvel movies, I
Mm.
believe, or maybe on the short side.
right. Yeah.
I actually had that conversation with someone else that, like, this was one of in the early part of the MCU. Each of these movies could be graded on a was it a good movie?
Mhm.
Like Iron Man, good movie. Iron Man 2, less good movie. Iron
Mm.
Man 3, somewhere in between those two. But after that, they all have to be graded on a saga scale where you can't judge any specific movie only by what's contained in that movie, because everybody was expected to see the rest of them. None of them
Right.
are good compared, or when you grade it just on a movie scale.
Yeah,
Like,
basically, I want to say after Avengers 2, it's like everything is just like you you can't just say whether or not something was good on its own merits. It's how did this push the saga forward?
Yeah.
yeah,
How does it connect to everything else?
like the Winter Soldier, even though it was one of my favorites on its own, not the greatest movie. Like, it doesn't
Right.
make a whole lot of sense. Nothing in that movie makes you care about the characters more or less. It's just how it fits in. It's a great chapter, but
Mm.
it's not a
Story.
complete story of its own. As far as Iron Man goes, though, it is if they had stopped making Iron Man after that, that would still be a great superhero movie.
Yeah.
hmm Like I remember going and watching this on opening night when it came out, and by the end of the movie, when he announces that he is Iron Man, and smash cut to the credits, like everyone in the audience was satisfied. Everyone was happy. If that had been it, and they had made no more Marvel movies after that, except for X-Men and that horrible Fantastic Four movie, and Amazing Spider-Man's 1 and 2,
Right.
like people would have been fine.
Yeah.
They
The
probably would have
post-credit-
made Amazing Spider-Man 3 if
if the MCU wasn't around.
yeah.
But yeah, and then when it got to the post-credit sequence where they're just like, "Hey, we got more," like everyone was blown away. That it's just like,
Yeah.
you gave us this great movie, and then you're telling me that there's going to be more of this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another thing that happened with this movie that I don't remember really being a thing in movies, like the post-credit scene. That, I mean, the post-credit scenes existed, but they were just like one last joke or deleted scene or something. But this was like one where it was like, oh yeah, you have to come back and watch all the other movies. You need to see this and know what's going on, and everybody needs to know that.
I feel like before this, the post-credit scenes, like you said, there were jokes, or they were just the bad guy's hand popping up out of the crowd.
Yeah.
And for me, prior to the MCU, post-credit scenes were only things that I would see if I liked the movie enough to buy the DVD.
Mm.
Like, I would never sit through the entire credits at a movie theater before, just because there had never been anything worth sitting there, and I'm not going to remember all those names.
Right.
But now now I'm disappointed when the credit scenes or the credits aren't good.
Mhm.
Like, I think I watched like some movie from like the 80s, Gremlins, and like I was like, oh, credit scene, and then like 30 seconds later it was over because they didn't have 2,000 people working on it.
All
And I
right.
was just like, what? Since when have credit scenes been short? Like,
Yeah.
so
I do like when it's like it ends, but then it's like the end, and then the question mark pops up. That's awesome.
I felt like another thing that this Iron Man did, that I feel like Marvel has always been really decent at, is like this one came out pre Me Too, right?
Mm.
And they took where in the comics his alcoholism was his driving focus. In this one, he is that douchey guy,
Right.
and his entire character arc is how to stop being that douchey guy, and that came out pre all of the events. But Marvel's always been really good at like tapping into what's going on in the real world and reflecting that in a Marvel world. And I feel like his character being like I'm the womanizing asshole, I should stop.
Right.
Mhm.
That's actually really cool to see, but it's also neat that Marvel went that route rather than being like,
Yeah.
let's talk about how alcoholism is bad.
Right.
Because it was taboo when Iron Man came out as an alcoholic back in the day, but now that's like the cool thing to be.
Yeah. Yeah. You're drinking like
So
those fancy
Yeah,
cocktails
that's
and
what
stuff.
fun
Yeah.
people are, right?
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned all like the Me Too stuff and its the take on all of that, how that was pretty progressive for its time. But there's still a little bit of stuff in there that is weird. Like there's a lot more shots of like hot girls walking around in bikinis that you don't see in movies as much anymore, and like all that sort of objectification stuff. And then there's also the scene where he's dancing with Gwyneth Paltrow, and he's kind of hitting on her and like, do I make you uncomfortable? And she's like talking about how she is uncomfortable because she doesn't have deodorant on and all this other stuff. And it hits a lot different nowadays when they have different views on, consent and women being sexually harassed and things. And it's like, oh, she's uncomfortable because she's so horny for him is what it ends up being in the movie. But it reads during the scene of like, oh yeah, her boss is like slow dancing with her,
yeah,
talking real sexy at her, and it's weird.
it is weird, and like I feel like in the movie, yeah, we all got the feel of like, oh, this is because of their mutual unspoken attraction,
Right.
but yeah, no, like that, and I feel like that needs to be taken on, and I feel like they did take that on later on in
Right.
the
Yeah.
MCU. And also, I just on the things reading different now, like it was a funny throwaway line, but Pepper Potts, her introduction was slut shaming
Oh yeah.
the reporter.
It's still
So
funny, but it is slut shaming.
Yeah.
yeah, but it is funny to look at that now, where it's like that was kind of uncalled for on both of their parts, being catty at one
Yeah.
another, but
Mhm.
but Pepper Potts took it that extra step too far of
Right.
just being like, yeah, I might be a glorified like special assistant, but
Right.
you're a whore. Where it's
Yeah.
like that's not cool.
Yeah.
She's a reporter, and a
Yeah.
reporter with needs. Like,
Yeah. With a woman's needs, a grown adult's needs, sexual needs.
If we're pointing out parts of the movie that you know it definitely flew in 2008, and nowadays it's like, ooh, I don't know whether or not you should have put that in the movie. Uh, Tony does tell a joke about Rhodey sleeping with.
Oh yeah, that's the other thing I wrote down.
Yeah.
Well, you also remember 2008. As a military man, he don't ask, don't tell was still a thing back then. So
Mm-hmm.
there was also, in all of the rules they had about equal opportunity and discrimination and things, you could still discriminate against people for being homosexual or trans or any of those kinds of things. So there were a lot more jokes like that in the military, and it's just in culture in general.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's crazy. They wouldn't make that joke nowadays.
Yeah, and technically, Rhodey wasn't making a mistake there, as was implied. He was just following the Air Force's guides of not asking and not telling.
Right? Yeah.
So
So he had to
that's,
act like that.
I mean, there's nothing he could do. Um,
Yeah.
just bringing up Rhodey, I feel like it's always really hard for any performer to pretend to be drunk, and I feel like
Mhm.
Terence Howard did a great job
Yeah.
in that scene. Unless he was actually drunk, in which case.
Okay. Who knows?
But yeah, I felt like that was something else too. Like we already touched on the casting, but I feel like
Yeah.
there was nobody in this that I didn't find to be a believable character in that world.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, I really liked what Terrence Howard was doing as an actor, like playing because he was playing him real square, but also was able to break down and have fun. And because like Terrence Howard doesn't have like the same kind of range and charisma that oh, no, I forgot his
Don
name.
Cheadle.
Yeah, Don Cheadle has, but like for the character, the way that he was playing it, it worked really well.
Mhm.
So I can
Yeah.
see how Don Cheadle moving forward, Don Cheadle playing him, you know, with the way Marvel movies went later on, and the way with the stuff they did with the character, it does make more sense. Having Don
Yeah.
Cheadle do it. Yeah.
But yeah,
Well,
Terrence Howard definitely played a lot more uptight.
Yeah.
and I feel too like if you ever do such a good job in your performance that they need Don Cheadle to be the one that replaces you.
Yeah.
You did good.
Mhm.
So I also feel like just like story wise, they did a really good job with Robert Downey Jr. portraying it, but also in the script and the pacing, portraying the lost little boy feel that Tony Stark has. That yeah, he's in control. Yeah, he's got all of this power, but at the end of the day, he's just a guy that has some serious issues with his father,
Mhm.
and never got past a certain level of maturity because he didn't have to.
Right.
And that I feel like they did a really good job of portraying that because we've all met that guy,
Right.
and maybe we, to some extent, are that guy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But you generally don't get to see that from a heroic lead,
Right.
or it's told to you, but you don't see it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's interesting to
That's
see
actually.
how.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, it's interesting to see how he gets, you know, he's held prisoner in that cave, and then that's how he's able to make it, you know, all those, make all that progress in making the miniature arc reactor and that technology that everyone thinks is impossible to do. And he was able to do it since he had just the time to focus on it and not have to worry about anything else other than just getting beaten by terrorists or whatever. And it just makes me think about how every once in a while I go, man, if I just could go to prison for a year and just work on, you know, writing or something, whatever the creative projects I wanted to do and not have any distractions, that would be kind of nice. That's been a
Yeah,
dream.
if the only stress I had in life was terrorists beating me up,
right,
I could probably get a lot done
yeah,
internally, like
right,
with my life.
write that novel, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. What were you gonna say, Chad?
What Rory was talking about with the vulnerability and the sort of problems that Tony has internally. I think that they actually sort of continued on that path throughout at least all of the Iron Man movies, because especially with the father issues, 100% carries over into Iron Man 2,
Yep.
where you know he's dying and then he's sort of petulantly acting out while that's happening,
Right.
and then in Iron Man 3 when they have to deal with his PTSD and everything, which Honestly, it's surprising that it took 3 movies for him to get PTSD, considering what he goes through in this one.
Yeah, you think just
Well,
the
and actually,
POW
Chad,
stuff.
it's interesting that you bring that up because having issues with your father is the number one way of preventing PTSD. So,
Oh,
like,
okay.
when you go off to war, you should really have a bad relationship with your family, go to war, come back, and then deal with the family.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
that solves almost
Right.
everything.
So whatever
People are
traumatic
just taking
stress
care of
you,
it wrong order.
yeah, whatever traumatic stress you're enduring while you're over there, like you're kind of putting it in the context of your shitty family life and upbringing. So like, I go, oh yeah, of course, this makes sense that these terrible things are happening. So it doesn't strike your brain as being wrong until later on.
Like, if his dad had loved him, he would have had a much harder time working under those terrorists.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I can only imagine.
Speaking of, like, we were talking about how he's gonna in the second one where like he's going through he's dying because like all the issues with his arc reactor thing and stuff in his chest. Like they have the scene in this one where he has Pepper like help him take the thing out and replace it, and she has to reach into his chest hole, and there's gross smelling liquids in there and things. I always thought it was an interesting decision by John Favreau, just like keep it in a wide shot the whole time and not do close-ups of anybody's face being grossed out or in pain or anything, even though he's talking about how he's going to go into cardiac arrest and all this stuff, and like they never show us like the inside of his gross chest hole. And I think a lot of other movies that I watch, they would probably do a lot of gross shots of what that looks like. So my question for you guys is, what do you think Tony Stark's chest hole smells like? I always want to know what things smell like in movies.
I think have you ever taken the recycling out for like a bar where it's
Yeah,
just like
yeah.
multiple things of alcohol, kind of stale,
Right.
and aluminum. Like
Yeah.
that's what I imagine. Maybe with like a side of like pastrami or something.
You guys ever smelled like an old metal slinky? That's what I'm picturing. Because it has kind of like a wet dog smell, but then also that metallicness to it. That's kind of what I'm picturing.
I've never smelled an old slinky, but now I'm imagining you smelling an old slinky.
Oh yeah.
You're like a weird robot elephant and kind of grossed out.
I had just assumed some sort of canned meat product,
Oh, okay. Yeah. See that?
possibly spoiled,
Mm.
since there was
Well,
juices
Yeah.
being described.
Right.
if he's rich, it's definitely a spoiled meat smell.
One of the other things that I wanted to talk about with the movie, I think everyone remembers AC/DC being like an Iron Man thing,
Yeah.
but this movie just had a banger of a score by Ramin Djawadi, the same guy who did the theme for Game of Thrones and stuff.
Oh. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
Like
I
I
feel
bought this because I wanted to get the soundtrack, and then I ended up buying the score by mistake, and I was just like, "This is fine though. I'm
Nice.
okay with this purchase."
I feel like you guys are definitely better movie nerds than I am, because you're like the soundtrack, and I'm like, the one song, and you're like the guy who made the soundtrack, and I was like, he just said AC/DC. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that guy isn't in
Yeah.
AC/DC.
I can't remember what it was, but I bought the CD that what I thought was the soundtrack to some movie in like middle school or high school. But I bought the score, and I can't remember what it was. But that's when I learned the difference between the soundtrack and the score. I was buying the wrong one.
I think that's how everyone, like pre-internet downloading music,
Right.
learned the difference between the two. Unless you were lucky enough to have an older brother that did it first.
Yeah. Well, the seed of it is always just not knowing and doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I bought the score to Empire Strikes Back. I want to say, because I was like, oh yeah, the Star Wars music, that'll be fun to have in the background. And then I realized that it's like, oh, a lot of those songs that they play just like for 30 seconds in that scene are like 4-minute songs.
Right.
I can't
Yeah.
listen to, Yoda Death on Endor or whatever
Right.
for
Yeah, you
that
don't get
long.
as many iconic songs from Empire Strikes Back as you probably would from the original Star Wars soundtrack or score.
Well, it's also like
Yeah.
you remember the original or the opening theme,
Right.
the Empire and the Alliance, and everything else is just like a weird blend of them. I mean, it's a great score, don't get me
Right.
wrong, but without the context of a movie, it's just kind of like, oh, this does
Yeah.
make me feel like killing my father. Like, I'm kind of sad about it, but at the same time, I realize it needs to be done. But like, outside of a movie, when do I ever need to feel that?
Yeah. Now I'm trying to
Side
think of
note:
anybody.
don't watch that or listen to that during the holidays,
Yeah.
just in case it gives you ideas.
Guardians of the Galaxy 2. That's the one where somebody has to kill their own father. I think that's the only Marvel movie. Yeah.
And he
happens.
doesn't even have that score. He's just got soundtrack.
That's true.
No.
It's just some 70s song.
Mhm.
Three Dog Night or something.
There's your prize for this episode is who can come up with the best 70s song about killing your father for Star-Lord's soundtrack.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Let us know in the comments.
Yeah.
So I wrote down, I think Iron Man has the most confirmed kills of all the Marvel superheroes. There's definitely 8 people that he straight up kills. There's 2 that he sets on fire during his escape, and then 6 other dudes that he explodes when he blows up his missiles in his second attack on the camp. So he's got 8 people that he's killed. I don't know if anyone else has killed that many on screen.
Maybe
I'm gonna
Captain
keep track.
America? Maybe.
Yeah, because I was thinking about it. Like, he definitely has a gun, like actual guns that he's shooting at people, but I don't know if we see who he's killing. So
Well,
I
feel
it'll be interesting to see.
I feel like if you're looking for like actual like straight up like you see the guy that got dead,
Right.
maybe not as much, but like if you consider that like he is not holding back when he's punching a lot of those guys,
Right.
like
Yeah.
that's Captain America punching you and you're a dude, you're
Right.
not getting back up. And if he chucks a shield at you, like that's
Yeah,
straight up
it's
vibranium.
amazing.
That's
it's amazing it doesn't cut your head off when he does that.
yeah. I'd be interested in like Nick Fury though.
Oh yeah,
I
that's right.
feel
'Cause
like-
he's like a minigun he's taking people out with.
Yeah. So, but I don't know like how many of that's on screen versus
right. Because like it's like Iron Man, there's a bunch of guys like he's hitting with his like repulsor beams and stuff and knocking them into walls, which probably enough force to crack their skulls open and kill them, but I think it's being shown in a way where we're expecting them to only be stunned or something.
Yeah.
But the people that he's setting on fire or exploding, those people have to be dead, right? So them or anybody who gets like shot with a gun, I'm gonna count those as actual kills.
That's actually one thing that I did like about the MCU and Iron Man in specific is that Marvel has like a wide range of superheroes that like are reluctant to kill, but totally down to do it if it's warranted.
Yeah.
And like I'm not saying that like Captain America just like goes off the chain and kills people because he's pissed, but like he's definitely shot Nazis.
Yeah, he was fighting in a war. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I enjoyed when I saw Tony Stark set some dudes on fire because he was like, "You guys are terrorists. I'm killing you."
Yeah.
And it was cool because Iron Man's never been that like, no more death. He's just been like, no more wanton death with guns that I made. Other than that, like, if you want to do this with Smith and Wesson, we're okay.
Yeah, that's sort of been Iron Man's MO for a while. It's like no killing with my stuff. Only I get to kill people with my stuff.
Yeah, because that was a big thing in this movie, and they kind of get into it in some of the future stuff. But like, he's like, all right, we're not making weapons anymore with our company. I'm not in the business of killing people anymore. But then he builds an iron, suit of armor and then sticks a bunch of weapons on it and keeps developing new weaponry because none of that stuff seems to exist outside of his suit. Like the army doesn't have any of that. And they're not selling it to anybody else. They just sell missiles and stuff.
Well,
He's
I
still
think
developing
that
new weapons, but keeping them to himself.
yeah, I think that's I'm going to quibble with you there.
Yeah.
Because when he says it's kind of a throwaway that gets trailed off, but when he says we're shutting down our plants,
Right.
he does trail off with saying until we can figure out a better way of doing this, because he's not like anti-weapon all of a sudden.
Right.
It's just he's realized his weapons are being sold to people that he doesn't approve of.
Right.
Mhm.
And so like I didn't get the impression in the movie even that he was even anti-weapons. He was anti-proliferation.
Okay.
Because his whole thing was like
Right.
I saw our people being shot with my weapons, and that I'm
Right.
not okay with.
Yeah.
So but yeah, I did enjoy that he wasn't suddenly like, no more death. I'm gonna knock everybody else out with $1 billion weapon that only I have.
Yeah.
Like, you could have built a better taser if that was your thing.
Right.
Which apparently he had developed something that's basically as effective as a better taser.
Yeah. Like a
Army
sonic.
didn't want it.
Yeah. It was crazy. Well, I think the army. I think there's rules in the Geneva Convention about weapons that incapacitate people like that. But I mean, for like the government as a whole, like police and riot police and stuff, could definitely use that kind of thing. But anyways, yeah, it's definitely something you think the government would have a use for.
Hmm.
And I think too, just with like the level of technology that we've seen start international too, there's a lot of like non-lethal protection things that he could really get into the like,
Right.
I'm not going to give you a gun, but here's a bulletproof vest that actually stops all
Right.
bullets.
His suit is made out of stuff. Like he gets shot by a tank and hit with like anti-air missiles and things. Like, yeah, if they could just put that stuff on regular vehicles, like that would save a lot of lives. Just doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, he didn't really have any of the bullet holes until the jets, right?
Yeah. Even then, like those are 20mm cannons or something. Like small arm stuff wouldn't do anything to it. Like that would be perfect for arming our soldiers on the ground and things. Or even when he builds the power suit and it's got all these like all the limb actuators and things for it. Like that technology could totally go towards prosthetic limbs and things and helping people that way. But
which is actually it's something they don't bring up in the movies very much. But in the comics, like he does do a lot of that. Like there's if you guys watched the MCU or the Netflix Marvel ones, Misty Knight is a much bigger character in the MCU or in the comics than she is on screen. But she actually loses her arm, and Iron Man is the one who makes a prosthetic limb for her.
Yeah, I guess we see him later on make the Uncheetle robot legs and stuff.
Yeah,
I was just thinking, like in the Iron Man suit itself, just what he makes in this movie, like there's a ton of technology there that can do a lot of good for people.
Like that chest flashlight, like that would be really useful to a lot of people.
Yeah, I just switched out the light switch in my bathroom today, and like a chest flashlight would have helped a lot doing that.
Yep.
Yeah, and imagine also, that it's also a magnet.
Yeah.
Right.
So you can like stick the screwdriver or something to the
chest. Oh yeah, you wouldn't have to lose it. Yeah, and all the little screws and everything. It'd do perfect.
I do feel like we've demonstrated though that like when the robot apocalypse comes,
Hmm.
like Tony Stark is going down for his abuse of his own robots.
Mhm.
Oh yeah,
Like
I mean,
rewatching how he
named
was talking.
dummy.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
like
like his robot arms with the fire extinguishers and everything that were helping him out, and he was constantly insulting. Are those were those Jarvis like part? Is he part of that? Like that AI? Is he insulting Jarvis when he's doing it, or just these
No,
individual
that's an
robot
independent
arms?
AI named
yeah,
Dummy.
Okay.
yeah. That
Oh,
one
its name
is
is
when
Dummy. He was
yeah,
asking for it. Or
yeah.
he was made to be berated
Hmm.
from Inception.
We're not reviewing Inception right now, too,
Right.
are we? That's not part of
We're
the
always
MCU.
kind of.
Everything's a review of Inception if you go deep enough.
Yeah.
Brum.
Um,
So speaking of other movies, I know that we talked about the Ten Rings connection between this and Shang-Chi. Were there other movies outside of obviously the other Iron Man movies and when Nick Fury shows up, the Avengers, uh, where you were like, oh, hey, this goes and ties into this thing?
um, I'm, I mean, other than the Ten Rings, and things like Roxanne, where I was like, oh, they brought in not just Stark International, but
Mhm.
like his competitors.
Hmm.
I don't now. I would have to go back and rewatch specifically for that, and I'll do that in the next movies of seeing what is tying into stuff that doesn't exist yet. Um, but no, I can't think of anything right off the bat. Um,
Yeah, I only really thought
Yeah.
about the Ten Rings and Shield.
Hmm.
um,
Yeah, I
I
think
do.
as we go forward later, like they have a big thing when I remember I think the second one where they showed Captain America's shield and he's using it as a just to keep junk on or something later on. So it's
Yeah.
like there's a lot more of this stuff later on. I think there's to tie the movies together and stuff. But as the first one, they just don't have as much that they know that they're going to need to be putting in there for other stuff.
I don't think that they had the. I don't think that they knew they were going to be able to do what they were doing
Hmm.
yet.
Mhm.
Right.
Like,
Yeah,
like
even with the Ten Rings in this one, I don't think that they were planting seeds for a future Shang-Chi movie.
Right.
I think that
no.
it's just that they used it as a sort of convenient callback because they wanted to have a Mandarin character.
Ah.
So I think
Um,
that with this movie, like the reason why it's interesting, what connective tissue it has to everything else, is because this isn't the seeds being planted for future stuff. This is all stuff that they later on went back and like we can call back to this.
yeah, this
Like
was
Yeah.
all
in
mine. Yeah.
what was it? Far From Home. The
Mm.
scientist that gets balled out by Stain for
Uh
not
huh.
being able to build the arc reactor. Like
Uh
Hmm.
huh.
that's one of the dudes in
Yeah.
Far From Home that's helping Mysterio.
Right.
Which just jumping onto the Far From Home thing, like rewatching the Iron Man movies and realizing that there are like a bunch of geniuses that work for Tony Stark that are not getting their due. They're not getting treated well, and that they become AIM basically.
Mhm.
Um, that's actually really interesting now. Where it's like, oh, he is a terrible boss. Like, if he wasn't a genius, no
Right.
one would work for this guy
Hmm.
if he had a
Mhm.
car dealership. Like, he is
Right.
awful. So I think that's kind of interesting when you go back to see how many monsters he's creating that aren't
Hmm.
easily identifiable.
Right.
Um,
Mhm.
Now I don't know how much they touch on this later on, but like if he does shut down their weapons manufacturing division, then that puts out of work probably some of the best weapons designers in the world to go work for less ethical corporations and things. So
mhm.
you'd think you would see more of that. I don't know if they do. they explore that anymore. But those people are out there and they need jobs.
I don't know, but it's possible that you just explained the plot for Armor Wars.
There you go.
All right, I was going to bring something else up. Now I can't remember.
Well,
Shang-Chi. That's one thing that I when I watch Shang-Chi, and I'm not as familiar with him as a main character in the comic books. I know him when he has joined teams and whatnot, but not his super backstory. But I do feel like, and this is my reading recommendation, that Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings yanked a lot of its subject matter from Jimmy Woo and the Agents of Atlas, which Agent Woo is from Ant-Man, but he has his own comic book team that actually does deal with take the Ten Rings organization, and it's called Atlas. But it's a great read of comic books if you are interested. I picked it up on a whim and was blown away. So,
while we're talking about that, for anyone who is interested in making that reading recommendation, there's actually sort of two generations of the Agents of Atlas. There's the first one, which is the originally was the Avengers of the 1950s, if you go deep enough back into what ifs and everything. But there was sort of a second generation of the Agents of Atlas where they revamped the title a little bit, and they just made it a team where it's all Asians.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I mean, it kind of sucks because it's well, what about Gorilla Man? But on the other hand, it's just they're eating spam musubi in this comic.
Nice.
I will check that. I've got that Marvel Unlimited, so I will check that out.
Oh, that's that good.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's my lunch break every day.
That's what I do in bed right before I go to sleep. Read a couple of comics.
I'll put hair on your palms.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they always say. But I started reading books before I go to bed. I got that Libby app. Start getting them library books and reading those.
Oh, and that one's free.
Yeah,
even better.
They got a lot of Marvel stuff on there too. I've just been reading. I've been reading Star Wars Legends books.
Oh, okay.
Well, one other thing I wanted to point out from Iron Man that I really liked, and I just noticed this most recent time watching it, was he has the whole thing where he's taking the selfie with one of the airmen in the opening scene. He's doing the peace sign. He's talking about how to put him out of business. He's not really a big fan of peace and all that stuff. But then when he gets rescued after he escapes from a terrorist camp and the helicopters come down to pick him up, and he waves at him and then he makes the big peace sign there, which is a fun symbol of his character changing and his views on things. That was an interesting thing I never noticed before in the movie.
That is a nice pickup.
Yeah.
One thing that I also I noticed about this one, and I know that it's a lot of this movie was CGI, but I feel like, especially for the time that it came out, there was a lot of people doing much worse special effects. And I feel like one thing that Marvel's done a really good job at throughout the MCU is keeping the special effects that they've done within the realm of proven technology. Even going back and watching it, it doesn't look as dated as a lot of other movies that came out at the same time.
Yeah.
That they killed on that.
Honestly, Marvel effects, I personally feel like the kind of CGI and stuff that they were doing, they've played it ahead of the curve for such a long time. Like one of the first Marvel movies where I remember watching and thinking that this CGI is obnoxious is Black Panther, and that's so far into the run.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And have you guys ever looked at the YouTube channel, the Corridor Crew?
I have
No.
not.
I would suggest them because they're I want to say they're an LA based special effects team.
Mhm.
But one of the cool things that they do is they actually interview computer animators and stuntmen, and
Cool.
they've interviewed the guys behind Black Panther, and that particular CGI scene that was really bad. Like the team talks about like how rushed they were, how
Mhm.
how little time they had to get that out, just because of other things that were going on. Um, and then they like go through and break down exactly every error that's in it and how it can be corrected. It's
Yeah.
really kind of cool.
That's cool.
Oh, okay.
Plus the dude that does the stunts for Black Panther, so the guy who's in the costume, like we've watched Captain America kill him like 4 times as a bad guy.
Right.
Like he's in the elevator scene.
Mhm.
So it's just the Corridor Crew. Check them out. They
Right.
actually do a really good job of
That's
explaining
cool.
special effects.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we start to wrap up, is there anything else you guys have to say about Iron Man?
The last thing on my notes that I haven't discussed previous to this, or two things. One of them, Stanley's cameo in this movie, where he's at Tony's party being mistaken
that's so
for
fun.
his hef. Like that's another thing, like the post credits things, where people attribute it like sort of directly to the MCU.
Right.
But just for the record, he was doing this prior to that. He was doing this in Spider-Man, in X-Men, like basically any Marvel property where he could make an appearance,
Right.
they brought him in. Like
Yeah.
the only ones that I can remember for sure that he's not in is Blade.
Yeah. You never see him play.
I do love how that they had to like talk him down from insisting on playing Odin.
That would have been great.
Like he was ready for that.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that I wanted to point out was the opening of the movie. I like fully expected to just hit play and then get the Marvel Studios thing and the pages. But before that, there was the Paramount opening. And I was like, what? I don't remember this. Is this the last one that has that? Do you guys think?
I wouldn't be surprised if the Hulk also has it, or maybe.
Didn't the Hulk come out before that?
The Hulk is the next one. We're doing Hulk.
No adjective came out before that, but the Incredible Hulk, the MCU one that we're gonna watch next week, that one is. I want to say that's the very first independent Marvel Studios one.
Okay.
So I don't think it's going to have it, but if it does, it's probably going to be the last one.
Right. Yeah, because I figure that might be why that one's harder to find streaming online. Or it's not on Disney Plus, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I wouldn't be surprised if it's because Paramount or someone else is in control of it right now. Yeah, we'll find out.
Or something. I don't know.
Yeah, something.
Also, independently of ranking the MCU in order, I think we should also have an independent rank of the best Stan Lee appearance.
Oh yeah, gotta keep that going.
Because like right now, my favorite that I can remember has to be the Captain Marvel one, because that's Stan Lee on the way to shoot Mallrats. That is like hands down has to be the best.
Yeah.
To memory, but
for meta reasons, that one is great. My favorite though is actually from Amazing Spider-Man, where he's listening to music in the library cleaning. Yeah.
So always the one.
Because that's just like a very fun extended scene.
Yeah. I'm always a sucker for that. Anytime there's just someone with headphones on and they don't realize that there's something crazy happening around them, that's always a good bit.
Especially because we're all wearing headphones.
Right now,
So
there's insane things happening in my kitchen. Yeah.
Yeah,
what were you gonna say?
I was just mumbling.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks for coming and joining us tonight, Rory, and mumbling your way through Iron Man. Great way to kick off this new series that we're doing. Thanks everybody for watching, and yeah, thanks Chad for this was your idea to rewatch all these Marvel movies. I was kind of expecting never to have to watch most of these ever again, but it's cool to go back and see what's up with them.
That's how content works.
Thank you, Chad, because I've been pressing to have a rewatch of the MCU. I'm a nerd, but now there's heat behind it where I can be like, no, I need the TV because it's for content.
Yeah,
it gives me that veneer of respectability that allows me to force myself to watch these again. So I'm not telling anybody that you guys aren't also reviewing Loki and Hawkeye because I gotta get my screen time in somehow.
Yeah. Well, I might do this as bonuses in 7 months when we finish all the movies. Yeah, you can fit in the series too. Why not? We'll see.
I'm down.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's going to be rough.
What we could do is instead of drawing that out for that amount of time, we could just have like a marathon and then review the entire series at once.
Oh yeah.
Then we could all the three of us could have a drinking game while we're watching it. And so,
I think I might have to actually go back to drinking if I'm forced to watch Inhumans again.
Oh yeah, I wasn't talking about Inhumans. I'm sorry. I take that back now.
You were thinking about the good stuff like the Netflix.
Yeah.
How many episodes
I was thinking about
Inhumans
Inhumans and
do?
Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. wasn't bad, right? It's just a lot of it, right?
The first
I only watched
season
like the
was
first season. I only watched the first season.
The second season was not good. The third season was good. Fourth season was great. 5, 6, 7 was not as good. But
wow. It's a lot of seasons.
Still better than 1 and 2.
Right. Oh, okay.
Like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was better than any other superhero TV show that was on until the MCU or until Netflix and Disney Plus started making them.
I just remember it came out and it was like, oh, this is the new Joss Whedon show, and everybody needs to pay attention and support this because we didn't do that for Firefly, and look what happened.
Yeah,
I have to watch this, and I watched the first season. Like, okay, that's good, but I'm all right.
Also, I feel like he kind of used up that goodwill on Dollhouse too.
Oh yeah, I like Dollhouse, man. I'm all about that.
Dollhouse was good, but I wish that the second season that they gave Dollhouse, they gave a third season to Terminator Sarah Connor Chronicles, but we've gone way afield.
Yeah, we'll have to figure that out in 3 years from now when we do all this. But anyways, everybody, yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. Next week, the Incredible Hulk, right?
We'll find out whether or not it has dethroned Iron Man as #1 movie.
Yes.
Spoiler warning, it won't.
All right. Well, good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
See you